Air, remember when you texted me last week and were like, "Are you House Shufflepuff?" And I was like, yes. No one can see it, but you're laughing, and I'm very proud of myself.
I've always loved fairy tales. I'm the definition of a romantic. Love stories and anything with superheroes are my favorite. Now that I'm 35, you think I would have grown out of them. But to be honest, the desire for a happy ending and adventure have only grown louder. And I thought 2020 was going to be my year to have it all. In January, I started a new and exciting job. In May, I had plans to travel Europe with my best friend. By the end of it, I was sure I was going to be engaged. But this year, I've spent more days crying in the fetal position on my living room floor than I can count because of another heartbreak and the isolation and fear that's been brought on by the pandemic and quarantine, and the trauma of racial unrest and seeing Black bodies being killed that look just like mine as I scroll through my news and social media feeds right before I have to show up for a work meeting at 8 a.m. 2020 has been far from a fairy tale. I've had to remember to keep stories of love and my heroes close, not just in movies and books, but in my life. And throughout my time in recovery, thankfully, I've met plenty of heroes who show me on a regular basis what it means to be of service and how to lead and fight for love no matter what. So today's story is from Nicole. She's House Hufflepuff, a Black woman in recovery and breaker of chains, literally. She currently serves as a juvenile public defender in Denver, Colorado, and she's one of my dearest friends. During our relationship, she has taught me that family can be made in blood and by soul, and that when we are hurting, we need to be held with compassion, love, and grace. We need to fight for each other. But Nicole's story reminds me that there will be many dark nights, unanswered cries, and times where no one will come to rescue you. But if you're open to it, maybe that's when you'll find a new hero, yourself. You're listening to a special episode of Beauty in the Grit. Happy Recovery Month, y'all. Reap what you need.
You've got Colorado Springs, and then you've got the Broadmoor. Okay, so I went to Cheyenne Mountain High School, and that's around the Broadmoor Hotel. And the Broadmoor Hotel is a 5-star, triple diamond, like huge establishment. And the only reason I know that is because I was concierge there. Okay, proudest moment. And it's a fancy hotel where a bunch of people from all over the world come in. They ask you questions like, did my dogs get their biscuits in the morning? And, I'd be like, let me check on that, ma'am. And that's where it came from. I remember that my family was the only Black family in that neighborhood. The best way to sum up my experience is that out of 365 students, I was the only Black student in my graduating class. I remember my first day of kindergarten. I'm so excited. I was an only child, and I'm ready to meet my new friends, ready to go out without my parents. And I saw these 2 little girls come up to me, and I was like, yes, this is it. But then they said, why do you look like that? Look like what? They held out their arms to me, and we're standing there at the playground comparing our arms. And that was the first time I realized I wasn't white. The sad thing is that there's countless stories like that. There's too many to tell. I can't even count the number of times growing up that kids physically grabbed my hair, physically pulled my hair towards them, yanking on my neck, questioning the dark color of my gums. When I look back and I read my journal entries, it's really sad, and it's really telling how I've always struggled with feeling beautiful and Black and just being proud of who I am. I would write down things as simple as, why don't the guys ever ask me to the dance? To as big as, why doesn't God love me? Like, I felt like I didn't even belong in this world. And I wrote about being bullied and how much pain I was experiencing, but I could never express, and I didn't know how to put words and even tell my parents. So I wrote it down, and that's what really helped me process, and that's honestly probably what also helped save me. My parents wanted the best for me, and it's really cheesy to say that I was their pride and joy, but the truth is I was. My mom, she was told that she couldn't have children. She believed that she wasn't going to be able to have children, and then suddenly she has me, right? And so she has this incredible opportunity to mold and create this little life that is safe in everything that she ever wanted. And so she wanted to protect me from the way that she grew up. And so my grandfather, in my mom's home when she was growing up, his alcoholism and mental illness terrorized her and her whole family. He shot guns in the house. He was physically abusive, emotionally abusive. They could hardly rest in their home. On the other side, my dad, he was a colonel in the military. And even his own dad was in the military. So he grew up with prestige and success. He grew up traveling the world, having new experiences, learning different languages. And so being the best was the only option. And together, they were committed to not repeating the history of my family's pains. And they wanted to shield me from the loudest narrative in society, especially from when they grew up. And that was that being Black meant being doomed. But the price of my upbringing was that I didn't really grow up feeling proud of being Black. Stories of Black joy weren't really shared. In history class, I didn't learn about my history. I didn't learn about our leaders, our activists. I didn't grow up with family reunions, matching t-shirts, cousins, and barbecues. I would always hear that song, I'm Black and I'm Proud, and at the time I really couldn't relate. So how did I survive? I pretended I wasn't Black. I pretended I wasn't me. I remember sitting in my bathroom with the door locked, quietly scrubbing my skin with bleach and Ajax until I bled. I remember burning my hair straight. And I never told my parents what I was experiencing inside. Fear, confusion, self-hatred, anger. Because in my mind, it was mine to deal with, and I had to focus on what mattered. And that was being the best. So I went to school, and I was the varsity soccer player, first chair in band, church girl, comedian, voted nicest person in my class, leader of countless organizations, everybody's best friend. I needed more places to feel right. And I was willing to do anything it took to distract myself from the pain of hating myself. My junior year of high school, my mom got sick. It's a disease called Devick's disease, and it happens to 1 in 6 million people. My mom became paralyzed from the waist down in less than 24 hours. She never walked again, and I never felt like a kid again. Our roles were completely reversed. I became my mom's caretaker. I was physically lifting her in her chair, to the bed, to the car. I was helping her in the shower. I was physically wiping my mother down. I was driving her where she needed to go. At home, I was completely powerless over my mom's pain because the sick thing about Devick's disease is that she was paralyzed, right? But she could still feel physical pain in her legs. She would describe it as fire in her legs, but she still couldn't move them. And I was also grieving the absolute change in my family dynamics. But at school, I kept pretending. I was used to hiding my pain there. So much so that I was even voted prom queen. And I continued to chase and find the place where I could fit in. In the summer of 2009, I went away for college. I went to a private Christian college in California. And for the next couple of years, my mom's illness wasn't the center of my universe anymore. I could keep pretending. I could keep trying on different masks, different voices, different personalities. I was also free to party. I didn't feel trapped in the negative narrative that I wasn't enough. And it felt great. But junior year of college, during finals week, I got the call I feared. My mom was in ICU, and she was in a coma. I made it home just in time to say goodbye. I watched the doctors take my mom off of life support. And the thing about that is, it's not like in the movies where they flip a switch and you hear like the dramatic beeping and suddenly it's done. No, my mom, she held on, and her body actually took 3 days to finally let go. Her last breath was Mother's Day of 2012. I picked out her clothes for her casket, her jewelry. I put together the playlist, the pictures, and I also spoke at her funeral. But the moment that funeral was over, I stepped out of the role of holding it together. I sat alone in the dark on the couch in our 3-story home, and it felt as if all the lights left in me had gone out permanently. So I picked up a bottle of tequila and I spent the next 4 years drunk. It's hard to describe what it's like to lose a mom. I was in so much pain, and I did anything that I could to numb myself. I didn't care much about anything. I don't know. It's like I couldn't taste food anymore. I couldn't see color anymore. But what's interesting is I did care about honoring my mom's legacy. I didn't want to waste my life, especially because I know how much she loved me. And so I decided to go to law school because I knew that that was a way to honor her, to honor that excellence that she wanted for me, to get that sense of pride. And even during law school, I tried to stop drinking about 4 times. One of my sobriety dates was my mom's birthday. Another was her death date. But even trying to make her proud couldn't keep me sober. So somehow I managed to make it through law school, but I failed the bar exam, so I couldn't practice law. And that moment was terrifying for me because I realized I was becoming exactly what my mom was afraid of. I was an alcoholic like my grandfather. I was hiding booze everywhere. I was feeling suicidal despite the money, the degrees, where I grew up, being voted nicest in school, on my way to being the first lawyer in my family. This disease still found me and I couldn't escape it. I couldn't stop drinking. Alcohol owned me. With no options left, I moved back to Colorado Springs. And I found myself, yet again, sitting in a dark room alone. I had a mattress on the floor, curtains torn down by my cat, a kitchen table with no chairs, a living room with no couch or TV, and a fridge with no food. I had a bottle of wine in my hand, probably a family size or something from Costco, and I wanted to kill myself. I was done. A random thought outside of my mind just entered and it said, call Pastor Wanda. And Pastor Wanda, she was my mentor for years. A Black woman, a lawyer, and a second mom who'd been such a strong support when my mom was sick. But through everything, I hadn't even thought about her for about a year. I hadn't reached out to her. But when I called, she answered immediately. And I poured out to her. I told her through tears that I wanted to die, that I couldn't stop drinking. I told her I missed my mom, and that I really believed that I betrayed my mom. And Pastor Wanda, she didn't judge me. She just held space for me and then pointed me in the direction of another Black woman from our church. And that woman, she'd shared about her recovery one day, and because she chose her truth over stigma, Pastor Wanda had someone that she could point me to. And that woman took me to my first recovery meeting. I haven't had a drink since September 13th, 2016. That wasn't a date I'd picked out. I tried to have these special sobriety dates, right? But just about a year ago, I actually found out that September 13th is actually the same day that my grandfather was born. My grandfather. The same man whose alcoholism terrorized and haunted my mother growing up is the same man I share my sobriety date with. There are no coincidences. And I don't think my mom would be more proud. My dad, the army guy, right, sat across from me at the table, crying, telling me that out of all of my accomplishments, my sobriety is what he cherishes the most. One of the other gifts that I have is I own a home. The same cat that tore down my curtains, she hasn't touched my curtains in my new home. She's still alive too. I have the best friends in the world who always fill my cup. Always. I know I can turn to them at any moment and speak my truth. Something I'd always wanted. I have a beautiful restored relationship with my father. I have a relationship with a partner who sees me, who in this time where Black women are struggling, he just came over and cleaned for me and brought me dinner while I just sat on the couch and cried. I don't have to hide or pretend in any of my relationships today. Denying my Blackness is as deadly as having a drink today. And I don't have to do that anymore. I'm learning to connect deeper with the Black little girl I'd abandoned long ago. I stopped trying to leave a part of myself at the door so other people would feel comfortable or so I could fit in. Even though I didn't grow up necessarily feeling a lot of Black pride, I am growing into Black pride today, and I'm in love with it. I've been practicing law as a public defender for close to 4 years in Denver. I specifically represent kids, some of whom are even charged and treated as adults. While I've only met one other Black juvenile public defender, 98% of the kids I represent are Black and brown. They look like me. These kids have hair like mine. And I know life was hard for me, but I still didn't experience it like they do. I was still able to go to college, and it wasn't a matter of if, but which one. I got to do activities and sports, and there wasn't any gang or gun violence in my community. My friends and I weren't constantly being followed by police. I didn't grow up with drugs or alcohol in my home. I was afraid that my mom would pass away, but I wasn't afraid for my own life. I wasn't always stopped for wearing a hoodie on a hot day. Yes, that is a real reason that I have kids that are constantly stopped. I had options, and I fight so these kids can have options too. I am proud to be a fierce, sober Black woman today. I survived hell. The hell of losing my mom, the hell of addiction. I survived the hell of scrubbing my skin raw with bleach to look white when I was a kid. Now I'm proud to walk into the courtroom with my braids or my natural hair. I'm excited to share my experiences with the court and my kids, not only when it comes to my race, but even when it comes to my recovery. I get to sit across from a kid and say, I struggled with alcohol too. And I'm not ashamed anymore. I get to use these parts of me to connect with my kids, and that's what they love. And I'm going to keep on healing and learning, but my journey is no longer about me. It's about fighting for a world where none of our babies are seen as a threat, but as children. Children who struggle with the need to fit in. to feel safe, who experience loss, addiction, oppression, suicide, fear, violence. They deserve a world where they are able to stand tall in who they are and be seen fully and whole as themselves. And that is what I work for. So thank you. Thank you to the Black women who came before me. Thank you to the Black women who answered my call. Thank you to my mom. Thank you to my ancestors. Thank you to the slaves who kept fighting for all of us. Because of you, because of your resilience, your love, and your grit, I'm going to keep fighting. And I get to do it sober.
This episode of Beauty and the Grit was produced, mixed, and sound designed by me, Ariel Britt. Eddie Randle was the story editor. A special thank you to Nicole Duncan for sharing her truth, and to House of Pod for the free recording time in the studio. Until next time, and as always, reap what you need.